Thank you, Ksenia. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So we are really looking forward to talk about the resilience, adaptability, and flexibility of supply chains today. And the great thing is that we have different verticals and industries covered: retail, insurance, and also health tech. So before we dive into the questions, I would like to also give a note to the audience that you are more than welcome to ask questions, because at the end we will dedicate 5 minutes for answering your questions. So in today's panel, we will cover also kind of like technologies, how technologies can help industries and big corporations be more flexible, more resilient when it comes to adapting to short notice changes, and also how technologies can help disrupt the industries. So we have 4 great stakeholders and experts here with us joining me in the panel. And first of all, I would like to ask all of you guys to really briefly, in 10 to 15 seconds, tell a little bit about your responsibilities and tasks at your organization when it comes to supply chain management. So first, Samuli, who is the head of digital transformation at DB Schenker, if you could tell us a few words about your key responsibilities at DB Schenker, that would be great.
Yes, hello. Digital transformation, it's all about, we're trying to unleash the power of modern technologies into making the transportation and logistics more efficient, more sustainable, something that we can all be proud of even after 10 years from now.
Thank you. How about you, Christoph? Christoph, can you hear us? What is your key responsibility at?
Yes, I can hear you, but you are a bit interrupted. So I hope you can hear me. I'm in the office here, so I'm still, sometimes I have some connection issues. So I'm the head of IT at Sana Purchasing and Logistics. Sana is one of the biggest healthcare providers in Germany. So we have more than 50 clinics and also a large global procurement organization where we negotiate basically prices for external clients. And we also have a we are also offering logistical services to clinics out of 7 warehouses in Germany. So I'm basically responsible for all the IT solutions that are supply chain.
Okay, sounds good. And we also have a special attendee here, one panelist, Tai, who is a co-founder and CEO of Contingent, a UK-based startup that is helping big corporations monitor and analyze their suppliers' compliance. So Tai, if you could tell us a little bit more about how did the idea come about? Why did you find it so crucial to make your idea a reality and create this product?
Yeah, absolutely, Livia. So thank you so much for inviting me to participate. So the genesis of the business is really one of experience. So I sort of spent circa 10 years in the risk space, working at a range of companies in the UK and in the US and across Europe. And it was a really common theme that I found when speaking to sort of international corporates and companies of all sizes, that there was a challenge across primarily getting the relevant data and information required to work with suppliers, and how they could leverage that data to gain true visibility of their supply chains. So that's very much sort of how Contingent was born. I guess in a nutshell, what we enable companies to do is to detect, map, and monitor their supplier risk. And we enable them to do that by leveraging new technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning, and by bringing in sort of various different elements into our data pipeline yeah, we're seeing a lot of traction. We work with a range of organizations, from large government entities to international corporates to smaller sort of up and coming companies as well.
Thank you, Tai. And last but not least, we have also Matthew on the line, who is the Director of Risk Management and Coca-Cola European Partners. So as a risk manager, what is your main challenge and responsibility at your organization?
Yeah, so Coca-Cola European Partners is the world's largest bottler. So we do not own the Coca-Cola brand, but we are the world's biggest by revenue and production facilities. My responsibilities cover the whole gambit of operational risk, be it supply chain. You know, we have 56 manufacturing facilities, and all our customer risk. In addition to that, we have 24,000 employees, so we're looking at the end-to-end for employees on, you know, employee benefits as well. But supply chain risk and credit risk are probably one of the top two.
Amazing, thank you. So thank you for the introduction. I think this gave a bit of an overview to our audience, what the expertise and the subject matter areas are of the panelists here today. With that, I would like to dig deeper into the growth of today's panel. So I would turn to Samuli again and ask, what do you think are the main challenges in logistics supply chain today, and how DB Schenker is facing these challenges?
Lovely question. I would say that even though the development has been like this for quite some time, the biggest challenge is to keep up with the pace of change. So we see that there is so much opportunities in how digital platforms, ecosystems, and AI, you name it, a lot of technologies can boost how we operate, and staying competitive is all about understanding and unleashing the power of these technologies. So we will need to be competitive by making our customers able to receive reliable services that are not only cost efficient but also environmentally sustainable.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a bit more about the industries, or like your customers, in the sense of like from which industries are you working with, and also geographically?
One thing about global logistics is that it's very much economies of scale. So we need to be able to combine cargo from different industries. So there is not one specific thing that would be ours. We try to cover them all, but of course there are differences. And if we look at Europe, we are trusted partner in electronics, automotive. For example, the Nordics part of the Europe, we are quite big in e-commerce, delivering parcels to consumers. And so it varies. There is geographical differences in how we operate.
I see, thank you. Christoph, when it comes to supply chain in healthcare, that of course has some specifics and unique features. What do you consider as main challenges to like face or ensure when it comes to the adaptability of supply chain in your sector, to really adapt and be flexible when processes change? What is specific about the supply chain in healthcare in that sense?
I mean, what we, especially now during the COVID-19 crisis and also before, what we experienced is a lot of material shortages, which makes it quite hard as a clinic and healthcare provider like Sana to really read the patients if you don't exactly know if you get the materials on time on the next day. And COVID for sure led to a massive increase of material demands. Paired together with an unclear planning on the healthcare operator or provider side, where we don't really know what does it really mean to treat a COVID-19 patient? So in general, what we need in regards to adaptability, I mean, we also heard from yesterday's session with Roche, that healthcare is mainly lagging behind other industries. So I would be already happy in healthcare if we get an electronic communication established using common standards to really have transactional data interchanged, so orders, shipping notifications, and so on. To really also have on our side more transparency. What are the shortages, where we need to react on short notice in order to have this visibility along the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. I see. And in terms of like ensuring adaptability and also visibility for your staff, do you only rely on your internal resources, or have you worked with any startup or any like external technology provider to ensure more visibility in your supply chain?
I mean, we are working a lot together with startups, but mainly in the clinical area, not so much in the logistic and procurement area. So we have now a quite promising pilot project where we have temperature measurement in our warehouse locations based on the active Bluetooth technology. And we would for sure also like to expand this technology also to further logistical areas, so to really have a closer shipment tracking down to the clinics itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting.
But I think especially in the supply chain, I mean, there are already a lot of good stuff and technologies out there in the market. So, and it's always the most complex thing is to really connect to the heterogeneous IT landscapes in the clinics and at the suppliers where you need to connect to the large SAP platforms and so on to really have this visibility along the supply chain.
Definitely. Tai, the next question is to you. So you are basically monitoring certain metrics and certain features about the suppliers of your partners' customers. What are all of these features that you think are the most important to monitor before going into any business relationship with your partners? And also another question to this: if all the metrics that you had before, have they changed, or did you add any new features and metrics after the COVID-19 crisis?
Yeah, happy to speak to that. So I would say, from our experience, sort of the primary metrics that organizations from a procurement perspective should be focused on when assessing suppliers and monitoring them is around financial fragility, certainly in the context of COVID and sort of some of the economic ramifications of COVID. Where possible, getting insights into the supply chain map of organizations as well. So really trying to understand how your supply chain is underpinned by suppliers of suppliers, so second and third tier, and ownership risk as well. Certainly in a climate like this, you will start to see sort of dynamic changes to the ownership of companies that you work with, obviously related to the financial implications. And then I would say, sort of going forward, there are certainly tailwinds that are focused around sustainability, and that differs depending on your industry. But all of those elements we provide insights across. And I guess as a starting point, really just trying to understand the nature of the supplier that you're dealing with, exactly what they do, all of the underlying sort of core information on that supplier. And most importantly, getting all of those insights, but being able to dynamically monitor those insights to see where there are changes taking place. We work with a number of organizations that prior to working with us felt that they didn't have enough visibility on sort of the dynamic nature of this data. And I think going back to the earlier point that you asked the question, what you typically find today is that a lot of the solutions that exist are usually built for KYC and AML use cases and aren't really specifically tailored to a procurement professional's needs. So, many organizations are essentially using tools that were developed by incumbents that weren't built for them and really don't meet their sort of needs, aren't really fit for purpose. So I think going forward, sort of just getting a view of how you can find tools that are more tailored towards your specific needs. So supply chain and supplier checks, rather than sort of broader business checks as well.
And how do you make sure that all the data information that you provide about the suppliers are realistic, are true, are up to date? Because your company is basically industry agnostic, but also like supply chain data and compliance data can vary based on different industries. So how can you make sure that all this data is true, it's realistic, and that also it's kind of that you ensure that you also have expertise in all the industries?
Yeah. So I guess as a starting point, within our product offering, we always provide the provenance or the evidence where information has been sourced from. I guess just to answer kind of your question as to how do we achieve sort of making sure all of data is relevant and accurate. So we use a combination of technologies. So we capture our own proprietary data. We also ingest data from open source, various different sources sort of around the world. We bring that all in together, and then we cleanse that data using machine learning and natural language processing. And essentially what that means is that we can also give you the genesis of where this information is, or the provenance of where this information has come from. And by pulling all of these sources together and dynamically capturing them, we can also update that information on an entity basis. So it's really about giving you the sort of single source of truth on the suppliers that you're working with, but the source of truth on the data that really matters to you as an organization.
Amazing. Thanks, Tai. So again, like in this round, Matthew, so what are some of the challenges in supply chain that keep you up at night, and that you really want to make sure that you face correctly in your industry?
Yeah, it's a broad question, and we won't have limited time to cover it. But thinking ahead, I think one of the comments that was made by another panelist, Tai, certainly we're having a lot more focus on the financial viability, the counterparty risk. Increasingly, how can I say, the dependence on historical information is increasingly non-valid. So we're looking at more real-time information. And again, when I look at supply chain, I really want to recraft this as a true end-to-end. There seems to be a propensity of focus on the inputs rather than the outputs. So for example, we, as a large corporation, we're also looking at the counterparty risk of our customers. So we could make a fantastic product, sell it to our customer, but not get paid. We could have the best input supply chain in the world, but if we don't get paid for our product, we don't have a business. So increasingly, we're looking at maneuvering some of the lessons learned from the output in the customer chain into more of the input supply chain. So certainly financial, the viability, and looking at much more liquidity is absolutely critical, and we do use some technology-based companies for that. I think the other concern is probably two things. One is the event-driven. So things like, longer term strategy of things like climate change. How sustainable are our suppliers today, and will they be around a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now? I think that's increasingly a key issue in consideration in the selection of our suppliers. And then beyond that, well, we're just seeing some more, emerging risks, particularly from the political side, a lot more kind of trade policy, trade wars, protectionism. Again, we're seeing, Brexit, for example. How do we deal with the potential fallout from that and implications for tariffs? What does that do for our customers as well? So there's an awful lot more kind of scenario building to look at, what if a supplier changes, what if an event happens, and what does that do for our value chains?
Interesting. And of course, like your role is very, very crucial at the organization, and you also have a lot of pressure and responsibility. But you also work with the insurance industry in a certain aspect. So what are the key features, and what is the most important for you that the insurance industry provides you in order for you to function as a good and appropriate risk manager at the company?
There's probably two parts to that in answering this. I think that insurance has been around for hundreds of years, so a lot of what we do is, how can I say, steeped in standardization. When we take loans out, there's covenants, we have to have certain insurances in place. We have a risk tolerance to take certain risks ourselves, but we also have an appetite which is much more aligned with our product. So we really don't want the volatility of certain event triggers happening to have a catastrophic financial impact to our impact to our business. So I think that the insurance industry does work very well in those kind of traditional areas. Where I think it doesn't work so well is in the non-traditional. If you look at supply chain, increasing number of event issues are to do with non-tangible triggers, cyber risk, just disruption in logistics, strikes, political upheaval, change in regulation. And the insurance industry, they can insure that, but there's a very small pool of clients are prepared to go into that area. And insurance by its very nature is a pool. If there's little demand and the supply is there, it's going to be very expensive. So slowly but surely that product feature disappears. Also, I think in today's current environment, you're seeing the cycle of insurance being very, how can we say it, is moving into what we call a hard market. Lots of challenges there. So we're seeing a retrenchment from a lot of the big insurers into much more of their core competencies. So looking at innovation in spaces such as supply chain, non-property damage, or contingent business interruption areas is really not an area that a lot of the insurers are really prepared to deploy capital. So the retrenchment is back much more to the traditional insurance and risk financing areas.
Thank you, Matthew. So unfortunately, we are getting close to the end of the panel. So we are getting a few questions from the audience. But before that, so what I wanted to ask is, and Christoph already touched on that before, that how COVID-19 affected healthcare. And I think Tai would be the best person to ask, as you have overview over more industries. What do you think? I know it's a very generic question, but what do you think how the turmoil over the COVID-19 affected supply chains in different industries? Which industries are suffering more, suffering less, and what the future brings?
Yeah, no, that's a really, really good question. I guess to speak specifically to sort of the healthcare industry, what we've seen from our customers in sort of the medical and the healthcare space is that obviously an increased demand to get greater visibility across the supply chains, which is obviously a response to more interest in their offerings. And I guess really to sort of extend on Matthew's point earlier, really understanding what the disruption risks are within those supply chains are particularly important for pharmaceutical, healthcare companies, medical devices, for example. Just trying to understand how a political event or an environmental event might affect their underlying supply chain. And I guess just sort of more broadly looking at other industries, I think there's certainly an acknowledgement across a broad set of industries that there needs to be more focus on supply chain and procurement specifically, to really just understand what the risks are from a brand, a legal and a contractual perspective. I mean, the way that we look at sort of risk is very much contractual risk. Is a supplier able to actually perform their offering based on the underlying sort of data that's available there, real time and sort of dynamic data, reputational risk. What are the sort of impacts that may sort of impact you as an organization as a result of your supplier's conduct, and really finally sort of regulatory and legal risks. So, are there regulatory challenges if you aren't able to really truly understand the suppliers that you're working with? And I think that's one in particular where you're seeing sort of a greater and greater drive for organizations when you consider things like the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in the US and other forms of regulation as well. So I think I guess in summary, there's certainly a broad acknowledgement that supply chain is a far more important topic for organizations.
Mm-hmm. And a bit of on a personal note. So how was your business affected after like the last 3 to 4 months? Did you experience any like slowdown sales cycles? Any projects have been put on hold?
So, certainly shouldn't be sort of positive around this. Obviously, it's been a huge challenge for many organizations and individuals, right? It's related to lives. But from our perspective, actually, we've seen a significant uptake in our offering, and we've also had the privilege of actually supporting a number of governments in responding to their supply chain focus in this area as well. So yeah, I think as a team, we're super proud of the work that we've been doing to help kind of support the response to COVID.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think somewhat this is a question more to you, as you guys are working with different industries, with customers from different industries. And there is a question from the audience if the healthcare, retail, and consumer goods industries, whether they have the same supply chain logistics challenges.
Quite likely, the same challenge behind it, the resilience, the optimization, that is common for all. Medical things are temperature, humidity sensitive, like groceries as well. So there are patterns that need to be solved. Just a hint for the startups. And so I think about the concept of digital twin and artificial intelligence. There might be something interesting in combining these two technologies in area of supply chain management.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Then another one to Christoph. What do you think about shortening the supply chain cycles? For example, re-risk it by keeping it as local as possible in the future? Should we focus less on price and focus more on risk and being resilient and being able to adapt to short-term changes?
I would say yes, and there are already many political discussions going on to exactly solve this problem. I mean, due to the price pressure, especially in the healthcare market, a lot of the manufacturers went to low-cost countries, and we are very dependent that those facilities really can provide the quantity we need globally. So at the end, this dependency we need to solve now, and I also think we need to change our incentive models. So at the moment, or as of now, we agreed on the lowest price. So we always had our negotiations, and the one with the lowest price wins, basically. But in the future, I see the model quite changing. So if we commit to, let's say, 1,000 masks, it will not be that we get a better price, but it will be that we get the security in the supply chain, that those masks are on safety stock, that those masks, for example, are also partially produced in Europe, to really have less risk in the supply chain. I think that's the main challenge we will face.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So I would have one last question at the end, if there is nothing more coming in from the audience, and that's more about like a more generic question regarding the future of global supply chain and logistics and what it will look like for your industries. And maybe Matthew, you can answer first.
Hi, everybody. Again, if I had a crystal ball, I just wonder where that's going to go. But I certainly sat through a presentation recently from, it was a professor at Harvard University who's involved quite significantly with the retail market in the US. And I was really taken by, I guess, the shift in technology where a lot of, I think, procurement at the moment is dependent on, descriptive analytics, probably moving into more of a predictive phase. So kind of getting that dynamic monitoring and whatever. But I think it's really moving into that prescriptive analytics. So that I really do think there's going to be a lot more kind of machine run, AI, algorithmic based, it's like decision making with clear outputs on, 4 or 5 or more outputs based on that prescriptive analytics, to then allow the humanistic interaction to say, yes, this is it's almost kind of pre-selected in advance, but the human element will be largely removed from a lot of those analytical processes. So that to me is where I see a lot of the efficiencies coming through. And perhaps the last piece is just coming back to the point that you mentioned before about localization versus globalization of supply chains. It's getting the balance right, because consumers at the end of the day, I think if we're facing a downturn in the economy, there might be a shift to more price sensitive products. So, like I said, the advantages of globalization has been to, help produce products at a much cheaper cost. Going local might well have cost implications. So it's getting the right balance, I think, about cost versus resilience and sustainability.
Sounds good. What do you think, Samuli? The same question to you.
Yeah, definitely. I see a similar future. It's going to be very much online. It's real time. It's connected. It's ecosystems. It will be optimized with intelligent algorithms, and it will be autonomous. There are some keywords where the future of logistics is going.
Yeah, so I think yes, it's very important that we really enable and let technologies help us with predictive analytics, with the constant monitoring of all the metrics and features in supply chain, because it's so diverse and there are so many stakeholders involved that the balance and the interoperability is super important. And if we have that, then we can be resilient, we can be flexible, and we can adapt to all the changes that the future brings. So I think with that, I would like to thank you to all the panelists, to Samuli, to Christoph, to Matthew, and Tai for joining us today. I think it was a very insightful discussion, and thank you very much for your inputs and experiences you shared with us.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you very much, Lilian.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.